Welcome to Business Insight Fredericton. I'm Krista Ross, CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce, your host. And today we're speaking to organizations that do good in the community. First up, we'll speak to Gilles Alain, Executive Director of the Chalmers Foundation. Gilles, tell us a bit about the Chalmers Foundation and your most important programs.
Chalmers Foundation actually started as the Chalmers Hospital Foundation in 1983, so we're closing in on our 40th anniversary very soon. Most foundations in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the hospital foundations were set up to buy medical equipment. The foundation did special events, raised money to buy equipment for the hospital. Now we're into a shift and we're going into another avenue where we want to do more community health initiatives.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, in 2016, the board felt buying medical equipment is fine. We have a good community of donors, good base of donors, but if we did more community health initiatives, we could actually make a difference in preventing people from coming to the hospital.
So how do you find organizations with whom you would like to collaborate? How do you communicate with them?
We, as an organization, are involved in the community, so through the chamber, through other events in the community, we proactively go out and seek those opportunities to meet new folks. At the same time, we're also open to receiving offers from third parties. The Lions Club, in Nashwauk Sis, it could be the Rotary Clubs, the Kinsmen, whichever organization. The Fredericton Motorcycle Club, for example, just finished another toy ride in the last couple of weeks.
So do you give a lot of consideration to competition, or what does competition even mean in this sector?
Well, the competition really is a charitable dollar. When we look to the community for donations, we have to be cognizant of who else is out there.
When you have that fund in place, how do you determine what it's going to be spent on? How do you prioritize the needs, or how do you determine what is the project that's going to be supported?
We cannot fund anything inside the hospital unless there's prior approval from the leadership team at Horizon. So we always have a dialogue open with Horizon to say we can fund up to X amount of dollars. So the cap to the executive director of the hospital and Horizon is about $750,000. In some cases, they would come back and it would depend on our financial situation.
So if you have somewhere between $750,000 and $1.2 million each year, is that enough to fund a project or multiple small projects?
Multiple projects. So in this particular case, the reason we did the 750, so the gap between the 750 and 1 million or 1.2, what we decided to do late last year was create what's called the Patient Impact Fund. We had been hearing a lot of stories inside the hospital where they needed the smaller projects. And with our merger last year with the Stan Cassidy Foundation, it's the same thing with a lot of the kids. The Bikes and Trikes program, for example. They're adapted bicycles that allow mobility for children who have rehabilitation issues or physical issues. They're able to drive a bike with their mom and dad in the campground or wherever they go, but the bicycles themselves can cost anything from $2,000 to $6,000.
How do you know if a project or a campaign is successful? How do you measure success?
The shortest answer is the dollars. So if a campaign is going to cost $550,000 or $600,000, for example, the digital mammogram that we're currently raising money for, it will be a success when we've raised the money. Then we can go to Horizon and say, we've raised the money, you can buy the equipment. That is typically the way it's done. I'll give you a story, and because I have the card here, it just came off the press literally last week. This came to our attention in the last year from the head of the ER. She had suggested that a lot of folks come in an emergency situation. So they're in the ER, they don't have a toothbrush, they don't have a comb, they don't have earplugs. And she said, is there a way for the foundation to consider this? We literally just got this off the press. We ordered little pouches and put all of those supplies in. The more options we have, the more opportunities there are for donors to say yes. And that's how the conversation came with Jake Allen. A couple of years ago, we had a conversation. He called, and my discussion with him was, what are you interested in? We had just started discussions for renovating the outdoor play area in pediatrics. We had found the foundation had just finished renovating the unit at 2.3 million, but the outdoor play area had not been touched. When I brought this to Jake and his wife Shannon's attention, they were all over it. So they said, yeah, this is a natural fit.
Something I was wondering about is how COVID impacted what you do here.
I won't lie to you, out of the gate, like everybody, like you would be at, as head of the Chamber of Commerce, what's going to happen? What are we going to do? And I remember one day, jumped on a call with a community foundation. Kate Rogers was still the executive director, Tim York's the Playhouse, Jason Dixon at the YMCA. A couple of the key charitable organizations in the city, just to find out what are we going to do, how are we going to react. Our biggest asset was that we're frontline healthcare.
What is the favorite project you've ever worked on here at the Chalmers Foundation?
The Love Your Lab campaign. It was a $700,000 project. The pieces of equipment are not what was important. The lab staff were ecstatic. They do 4.5 million tests a year. It's a machine. There are 130 or 150 staff in there. When the foundation approved that project, they were so grateful.
So how do you measure success of a campaign?
The dollar value is typically how we measure it, but the impact it will have.
Tell me about organizations that have helped the Chalmers Foundation.
The Chamber of Commerce is huge because of our role as a member, because of the events that the Chamber puts on in the city. It allows us to be out there to network. The YMCA, the other healthcare sector players, Hospice, Fredericton, York Care Foundation, Pine Grove.
Recently, the Chalmers Foundation merged with another organization. Tell me about that.
The Stan Cassidy Foundation. So they approached us and started negotiations with us to see if there was interest, and our board agreed. Their board agreed, so we struck a working group and worked out the details, and in November 2020, the deal was struck, and as they say, the page has turned and we're moving on.
My last question today is, what's next? What are your goals for the next year or 3 years or 5 years?
So there's 3 areas that we're looking at. New construction will include brand new surgical suites, brand new labor and delivery, maternal, NICU on the second floor of that wing, so the south addition. The community health piece is brand new to the Chalmers Foundation, is youth mental health. Had a couple of significant donors knock at our door and say, basically enough is enough, what can we do?
Welcome back to Business Insight Fredericton. I'm Krista Ross, CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce, your host. In today's episode, we're talking to organizations who do good in the community, and there are none better than United Way, Central New Brunswick. Join me as I talk to Faith McFarland, their Executive Director. Tell us about your organization. Tell us your main focus and the most critical and important programs that you run.
I'm here as the United Way of Central New Brunswick. It's an organization that would be like a community impact organization. And it's been in our community for 61 years. The idea is, what about coming together under a united way, a united approach, where each person gives a bit of time, or gives a bit of resources, or give a bit of expertise. And so what a united way does is it brings all of these different concerned stakeholders and individuals together.
So what area does United Way of Central New Brunswick cover?
We reach all the way up through York, Carleton, Victoria, Madawaska, and even fund some programs all the way up in Restigouche, and then some funding as well in Queens.
A lot of people think of the United Way as a collector of money and distributor, but it sounds like it's much more than that. Tell me a little bit about that.
So right now with the United Way, I think one of the powerful roles that it plays is that it has a seat at the table in terms of looking at issues when we talk about more complex social issues that take a bigger arc and bigger time in terms of how do we pull partners together and different stakeholders to work on that and collaborate.
So who would you say is your main target audience? Is it the community at large?
Really, it's the community at large. We work with like 108 different businesses that host campaigns.
When you talk about 108 businesses hosting campaigns, what does that mean?
These are folks or businesses each year that have employee giving campaigns. And so those are folks who would pledge to United Way through their payroll deductions. And through that, they would participate in other events, like we do something annually called a Day of Caring that brings out we match businesses with different community-based projects.
I'm not sure if this is relevant for the United Way, but do you have competition? And if so, who's your competition?
I think what we're competing against is, I think the benefit of doing collective impact, of being able to pool together and say that we're going to make a collective investment on an issue, and we're looking at something like housing and homelessness. And so I think what we compete against in some ways is that culture, where people have a stronger need right now.
How do you stay on top of best practices? How do you know how to move forward in a shifted society?
What's been wonderful is even say with United Way Canada, which is its own independent partner, but we're a member organization, is sometimes allowing them to take the lead in helping us with research and really trying to get a better sense of, if we're a small organization like this, truly, like how do we best use our time and our resources?
I always had an impression that the United Way raised money and then figured out ways to hand it out to organizations in the community, and what I'm hearing from you is that it's so much more than that. But I know that's part of what you do. So how do you decide which organizations get those funds that are hard to raise and that's a big challenge? How do you decide who gets it?
We put a general call to community, and any charity is welcome to submit applications, to talk about their projects and bring that back. But for us, we use a table of community volunteers with a wide range of backgrounds who bring different considerations to the table as we go through the process of weighing and looking at how do we prioritize those.
This episode is focused on doing good in the community. And that's why we picked the United Way to talk to, because we know you do a lot of good. You do a lot of good in terms of the social programs and things that you're talking about, but financially as well. So financially, how much money are you putting out into the community each year, and how many projects does that account for? Traditionally,
Pre-COVID, it would have been like about, really in terms of like a community, what we all pulled together as our region is about 1.36 million. And for us, like, so that means that really has to go directly back out. And so for us, we fund last year we funded 32 different community organizations, but across 56 different projects. But during the pandemic, like in the very first few days, before they even really called a state of emergency, we rallied and got the Atlantic Compassion Fund going. And that first week, it was like a Friday the 13th, and we left, and then we all came in on that Monday, and the world was different. And it was such a strange week, but by that Friday, we'd already put a call out to community organizations who needed resources to pivot.
During COVID, you did set up new funds and you set up new programs, but what about that regular funding, that payroll deduction funding, or just people that typically donate? How was that impacted?
We set a goal, like in those big networks of discussions of what is this going to be? We're thinking maybe it's going to be even 30% less than the year before, you know? So we set a goal that was 20% less, but we exceeded it, you know? So we got past it, and it was interesting. Yeah, some of the workplace campaigns saw, interestingly enough, more people participating.
How do you judge if a campaign or if a project has been successful?
We're shifting our view away from the dollars to the lives impacted. And so really working with our community organizations that are helping on that work and our own internal projects to really try to understand that.
So you started here in 2019.
Yeah.
What is the favorite project that you've worked on? What has fed your soul the most?
Day of Caring blows my mind when we do that. And the first year when I've been involved with Day of Caring before I was working with United Way, but it's impressive to see, 300 volunteers across like 30 different sites working on different projects.
Are there unique challenges that you face that other organizations or businesses don't face?
Absolutely. It's important work. It's very varied, but quite often we look at how when people are working, let's say, in mental health or crisis services, working with children, often these are folks who are some of the lowest paid in society, doing some of the most complicated, meaningful work. And so I think it's often undervalued.
We've talked a lot about the work that you're doing and how it operates and the volunteers that you have and so on. It really leads me to the question that I think people who are watching this will be asking, what can I do? So if somebody's watching this today and they want to know how they can engage, what can they do?
One of the initiatives we support is Connect Fredericton, and that is a database and a portal where we ask different community partners where they're able to put online if they have needs around their board, if they have short-term volunteerism or long-term volunteerism. Right there, I think it's difficult sometimes to know where do I get started. I would ask, if someone has a bit of a passion, connect right there and see what's available. And the other piece that's really important is to stay informed.
Welcome back to Business Insight Fredericton. I'm Krista Ross, CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. In today's episode, we're talking to organizations that do good in the community. Up next, we'll be speaking to Calvin Milbury, who's the Executive Director of the Fredericton Community Foundation. Tell me about the Fredericton Community Foundation and your main focus.
We help caring donors support causes that matter to our community, enhance lives here in Fredericton area.
What are your most critical and important programs that you run?
Well, right now our flagship program is the Community Grants Program, and we recently just awarded $160,000 worth of funding into the community, and that supported 35 organizations locally in the greater Fredericton community.
Tell me a bit about how the organization got started.
Well, it has a long, rich history, and it was originally founded by A.R. Clark, and he set it up in 1956. And it was set up as a perpetual body, so the idea was to create a public foundation that would be here over the long run to support community causes.
So tell me a little bit about the history and what's happened since then.
Well, from 1956 till about 2000, it was more of a fledgling organization struggling to raise money. But in 2000, the Fredericton Community Foundation joined the Community Foundations of Canada, which is a national network of community foundations. And now there's 191 of them across the country. And so when we joined that organization, we were given lots of advice and best practices and policies to set up. And that really catapulted the Community Foundation forward. And so the model that we pursue is an endowment-based model. So we are a charitable foundation. However, when donors gift to the foundation, we invest that money.
Do you have a board, committees, staff? How are you structured?
The Fredericton Community Foundation is overseen by a board of volunteers. So we have 15 board members that currently serve on the foundation's board. And then we have a 3-person team here at the foundation that takes care of the day-to-day operations.
So how do you communicate to your donors and to potential donors?
We're in regular contact with our donors. One of the things we're trying to pursue going forward is engaging with our donors to determine what their philanthropic interests are. And so building that relationship with the donor is critical, and ensuring that we're working in tandem with them to address the areas of interest that they have.
So I know that you look at endowments as a way of growing the funds. So
Right.
People donate, you invest, and then you distribute. But I also know, and I know this because the Chamber has done it, we have our own fund that you hold for us, which is our scholarship fund. We contribute to it, you have helped it to grow, and we distribute it to students each year that are pursuing post-secondary education. So how do you attract people to consider doing their own private fund with the organization?
Every donor is welcome, so it's the Fredericton Community Foundation. It's community, so everyone should see a place in the Community Foundation. Some donors would give generally, and that would support the community fund, and we'd put that money to work in the community to support causes. Other donors may wish to create their own fund, and in so doing, we'll sit down with them and actually tailor a solution to meet their needs.
So how much money do you have in the fund today?
The Endowment Fund stands at about $18 million currently, and we would have another $3 million in managed funds that we have. So as a pool, it's around $22 million.
So how do you determine where the money goes each year?
It varies, but with the community grants program, so our community fund, our field of interest funds, they come together under a community grants program, and we actually have a grant-making committee that's appointed by the board of directors that oversees that process. So charitable organizations who wish to apply for funds would do so, and those applications will be reviewed by the team here at the foundation and vetted for eligibility, and the eligible proposals would go before the grant-making committee, who would each have a turn evaluating them and scoring them. And of course, it's a daunting task because they're also meritorious of receiving funding, but there's a limited amount of money. And so the grant-making committee makes the decisions as to which projects should be awarded funds each year.
The focus of today's episode is doing good in the community. How much good can you do each year? And is it more important to support many small activities or to support a few large ones?
Right now, the Community Foundation is putting $500,000 to $600,000 worth of funding to work in the community, which is sought after and needed. And we typically, like last year, it was 35 organizations that was supported. So we try to invest and support as many projects as possible to move the needle forward.
Tell me how COVID impacted financially, but how did it impact your organization?
COVID was a setback for us, like everyone, in the sense that we were unable to interact with donors, with clients like we used to. So we were forced to go online and start working remotely and innovate to figure out ways we could continue to collaborate with our partners, with the donors, to keep everything going. Thankfully, we have very generous donors who continue to support the foundation throughout the pandemic period, and we've been able to keep the business going relatively as per usual. In particular, the federal government had created the Emergency Community Support Fund, and that fund was administered through the Community Foundations of Canada, and it gave us an opportunity to basically manage and administer that for the good of the greater Fredericton area. What
would you say is the Fredericton Community Foundation's biggest success to date?
I think our biggest success is the fact that we've been in business for such a long time. It's over 65 years now. We've been here as a trusted partner in our local community, someone that donors can entrust in giving back to their community, and charities can trust in getting support for their various projects and programs.
So you haven't been with the Fredericton Community Foundation very long, but you have worked in the not-for-profit sector. What's the most difficult thing that you've encountered in the work that you've done in the not-for-profit sector?
Well, I think sometimes you can feel like you're isolated. So you might be working, you feel like you're working on an island, so to speak. So I think it's very important to continuously reach out to other partner organizations, other not-for-profits, to share some of the challenges you're facing, to share success stories, and basically collaborate on new opportunities. So that's been something that's always allowed me to kind of keep going forward, is that opportunity to partner or work with others.
If you were going to give advice to somebody who was beginning a role as a leader for a not-for-profit organization, what advice would you give them?
To bring a can-do attitude to work each day. So when you identify a challenge, a problem, instead of kind of outlining the issues or complaining about it, I'd prefer to bring a can-do attitude to the table and identify solutions. So that solution mindset for me has made a difference in my career, and I really believe that if it's all about attitude, so if someone comes into a new role and can take that attitude on and look for opportunities, the whole organization will kind of move in that direction.
We're always looking for great companies with a unique story to feature on the show. If you have suggestions, please get in touch with us.